let's talk about housing affordability. This is not just an Australian issue, but it's a generational issue. And I have two kids. I have two kids. One of my daughters has three kids. So I've got three grandchildren. And I've always been of the view with my wife that you don't value what you don't earn. So we support our kids, of course, but we also want them to make their own way in life and get to where they're going to get to economically or socially off their own steam. And in reality, my kids have all got good jobs, but none of them can actually afford to buy a house in the way that I was lucky with my wife and I to be able to buy one when we were 26. We could buy a house and comfortably buy a house. Whilst the mortgage was a bit of a stretch, at the time it was digestible. But now we're in a whole different situation where it feels like a generation of Australians just will never be able to buy a house. I'd love to get your take on the housing affordability crisis, what your perception around the drivers are, the impacts are, and what we can actually do about it.
Look, it is a crisis. There's no doubt about it. I think we're too focused, the governments, both state and federal, are too focused on affordability and they're too focused on first owners. And I think it's always an issue. Any grant, we've seen these grants come in before. I actually cheekily call it should be the first sellers grant, because what used to be $800,000 in Sydney, a unit, because of the first homeowner grant, it artificially stimulates a market that's very healthy anyway. And all of a sudden it goes from say $800,000, all of a sudden they're now valued at $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Because every man and all the parents are pushing their kids, now you got to buy. And also rent caps, some state governments, I think ACT and Victoria, that's even worse. That kills the investor market.
Yeah.
And particularly ACT, we've got evidence of interstate investors just ringing up our offices in the ACT saying sell. And then, of course, because of the first homeowner grant, invariably first homeowners buy that, which was an investment property, and it gets taken out of the rental pool forever. And then, gosh, what do they have? They have an even worse crisis because of the lack of stock. So it's sort of, particularly some governments, I think some of them see the property owners as a cash cow in raising revenue. And two, without being too dramatic, they see the property owners as the enemy, and they're not the enemy. And remembering most of these investors own one property. They're not property moguls, they're not fat cats, and they're not slumlords. So there's a lot of disinformation about it. I think it is going to be generational. It's going to be 20 or 30 years before we really fix this issue. But I think the government, state and federal, should decentralise. Now, look, at New South Wales, we're lucky, and Victoria too, we have robust regional, and I'm not talking about the coast, because every Australian, and that's the trouble, we're so urbanised. I'm talking inland, Wagga, 70,000 people, Dubbo, Bathurst, Orange, and of course, Victoria, Ballarat, Bendigo, Wodonga, and over the border, Albury. These are robust places. Employment's easy. There's significant job opportunities, but I think younger people tend not to move. I think we're all a bit spoiled, James.
Well, I think that's right. Although I have to say, I'll call it out. My daughter moved to Ballarat with her family because it was and they don't have any relatives up there at all or friends up there when they first moved. They moved because it was more affordable. They moved from a lifestyle perspective, and they moved because when you have, as you had, I think you said you had 5 kids, but she has 3 kids under 5.
Yeah.
And it was like life is chaos. And to be able to live an affordable lifestyle in Melbourne was just too challenging for them. And now they love it. They absolutely love living in regional Victoria, particularly when it's not too far from Melbourne, so it makes it accessible.